Sounds good. Hi, everybody. I'm Molly. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm a brand strategist that specializes in working with neurodivergent business owners, entrepreneurs, and I just help them use their brain in a way that's positive. A lot of times people who are autistic, ADHD, bipolar, they're told that they can't do things, whether people don't understand how they operate or understand how their brain works, or they're just not able to fit into a corporate environment. Like, I know there's a story about that coming up. And so they fall into entrepreneurship, not by choice, but by pretty much, life or death. And so a lot of times they just get stuck, and burnout happens even faster when you're already in a place where your mental health isn't great. And so I just help them figure out the parts that make the most sense to them and help fill in the gaps with other things that would make sense to them. So we do everything from marketing, structure, just understanding business basics, because how many people have you seen start a business and don't even know anything about how to price anything, And so I help all of those things. And so most people are like, well, how did you get into that, Molly? That's very unique. Well, that's a story. So I started out in the military. I was a Russian linguist for 8 years, but I never actually did that. So I went through a whole crap ton of training just to be like, hey, you're really analytical. Can you help with this program and figure out these regulations and make sure that they come together? Some of my duty stations I did do like OEF, OIF, not that that makes any sense to you guys, support, so in-country support. But after I saw some things and heard some things, and after I took a Psychology 101 course at my local community college, I discovered about myself that I had all the things that the textbook was talking about. And I was like, what do you mean that's not normal? What do you mean that people don't experience anxiety that makes it so you can't move, or all of these things? And it's funny how self-awareness can either help you or hurt you. And in that initial phase, it definitely caused issues for me. Eventually, the military was like, you're no longer worldwide deployable. Here, we're gonna let you retire. And so at 24, I was retired. My husband was still in the military at the time. And I didn't know what the heck I was going to do with myself. I had worked in finances. I was the unit RA. I got to manage a whole crap ton of money all the time. I was a program manager. I oversaw personnel. I had all of these skills that you need in business. And I was also a super creative person. And so obviously the first choice was make all the things and sell all of them. That was obviously the first choice. You need a peg doll, it's gonna look like Harry Potter. You got it. I did all the things, and eventually I realized I hated all the things except for graphic design. And I really enjoyed that part, and so I started a stationery business that I still have actually. And I started doing wedding stationery. And as I continued to grow that business, I niched down and started working mostly with queer couples, because in the wedding industry, it's so common that everybody assumes that there's a groom and a bride or what have you. And so queer couples tend to have to come out constantly over and over and over again through their wedding planning process. And I felt like that was not fair to them. They're supposed to be happy and excited and get married. And so I focused on that, and I continued to build that. And all of my stationery friends were like, how do you know how to do these pricing so well? How do you set up your CRM like that? How do you understand all these things? And I was like, oh, this is not standard knowledge for everybody. Like, nobody defaultly understands Access databases, And so I started helping other stationers build their business. And then I became a virtual assistant, and then I realized I really don't do well not being in charge, and I couldn't just do the work that the person was asking, because they didn't know what they were asking for. Like, they didn't understand the basics of their own business. And so they would be like, well, I want to run a Facebook ad, but you've never posted anything on social media ever. Like, that doesn't make any sense. You have to have a foundation before you do that. And eventually my clients kept saying, thank you for all that strategy help. And I was like, oh, I'm a strategist. Gotcha. And so like it just kept evolving and evolving. And as I learned more about my own neurodivergence, my kiddo is autistic with ADHD, my husband's autistic with ADHD, I realized that I am the neurodivergent whisperer, because I also helped my friends discover that they were also neurodivergent in different capacities. And people started coming to me and be like, Molly, do you think I'm autistic? And I was like, you don't? Like just these moments of like, am I the only one that saw that? Okay. And so I realized that I had this ability to see things in a way where I could understand where people who are neurotypical come from and why they do things the way that they do, and why people who are neurodivergent do things the way that they do. And I can help the two of them communicate in a way that not a lot of business strategy and business help does. Because people forget that even though a majority of the time you might have a client who's very typical, does all the things the way you want them to do them, it doesn't mean that every client you have is going to do it that way. And I like to compare like the process of a business to like a ball of yarn. And a cat has gotten a hold of it, and they've unrolled it and it's kind of fallen into this knotted clump. And all of those knots and intersections of that ball of yarn is how your customers interact with your business. It's not linear. We like to say it is, it's not. And there's different paths, and some people might take 8 months to get through your process, and some people might take 2 hours or 10 minutes, and we have to plan all that out. And that perspective is important when you're talking with a person who is frozen with any decision whatsoever, and explaining like you don't have to know all of it today, but you do get to know that every step that you do focus on and take a step towards completing, you're moving one step closer to connecting with your client. So yeah, I think I covered most of it there.
So you alluded to a corporate story. Would you like to share that with us?
Oh, it's just the military. Well, I actually did work in corporate America. I always forget about that. So I obviously got voluntold to retire from the military. And then I I started working for a manufacturing company in Utica, New York, and we made gas station canopies. Like you go to get your gas and above you is a canopy. I was the sales manager for that, and there's only 5 companies in the US that actually sell them. And we did most of the Eastern United States. And we also sold like bulletproof gas station kiosks or like security booths, and I did not deal with that stuff. And I was really good at my job. I was really good at saying, why aren't all of these things filed? And going and just getting it done, at least when I was in a good zone. I'm bipolar, so it was before I knew I was bipolar, and I did great until I didn't. And then once I had my downward dive of emotional fun, I couldn't barely get to work. I was late all the time. I was struggling to keep up with the amount of work I had been doing, because when I'm in a good zone, I work probably 3 times more than the average human because I don't sleep. And when I'm in a bad zone, I work like a third of what a normal human does. And so that fluctuation really affects job performance. And in that event, I ended up leaving because I got pregnant. That's a totally different story. But I don't think I would have been successful long term. Like, they wanted me to eventually become more in the company, but as you get higher in a company, you get more responsibility. You have more things, expectations and stressors put on you. And now I know that wouldn't have been possible. I could barely get to work on time or talk on a phone, and I had to do that every I do not talk on the phone now, but I had to talk on the phone all day, every day, you know, and understanding where your strengths and weaknesses are is important. And I'm very grateful that I am in the position that I'm in now where I control all of that. I blow up my schedule at least once every 6 weeks, where everything that I've decided is working, everything that was working, it stops working, or my child gets sick, or something happens and it dysregulates me to the point where I no longer can follow my ClickUp or my to-do list, all of those things, and I literally just blow it up. The things that I have committed to somebody else stay, but everything else gets moved around because I have to adjust to my mental state at that given moment.
So from what you've said already, you help your clients, but it also sounds like you also provide education for the people that you are providing services for. Do you feel like, is that accurate, how you depicted that? Yes. I mean, I fill the role that I need to. I really, for many different reasons, mostly trauma related, I'm assuming, I don't like the name coach because it has a negative connotation, especially in the online world, of people who ask you questions but don't necessarily help you. And I don't like that. I realize there are amazing coaches out there, and I'm not saying that all coaches are terrible, but I've always resisted that label, but people keep giving it to me. And so I've owned the fact that yes, there's some coaching, there's some strategy, there's some virtual assisting, all those things. But educator, I think, is the most important piece of that, especially for neurospicy folks, neurodivergent folks, because a lot of them need bottom-up learning, so they have to know how every piece of something works before they can do the next step. And so if I was well, just post something on social media, they would be well, what do I post? I don't know, figure it out. But why am I posting? Who am I talking to? They're gonna just keep asking these questions inherently, and they're gonna get more frustrated and just not do it. So teaching the foundational things of why do you post on social media? What's its purpose? What are the expectations you have of your followers? What are the expectations you have of yourself? What do your followers expect from you? All of those things help them. And I actually do teach classes in town to help entrepreneurs on a more, or small business owners on a larger scale. So I teach finding your ideal client, because your ideal client, if you don't know it, you can't do anything in your business successfully. And so just learning why it's important, how you find them, all of those things. I teach profitable pricing, because a lot of entrepreneurs, I like to give the example of craft shows. People at craft shows like to believe they don't own a business. And I'm no, you do. You just don't take it as seriously as you take your day job, and that's fine. But you can't spend $400 on a quilt and sell it for $50. You're paying someone else to take this thing from you, and it doesn't work that way. And that's an example that most people would see in real life. But a lot of times, food industry folks who start a business or buy a franchise that they have control over pricing, they forget to mark up their ingredients or include time when you're frosting a cookie, or all of these things that add up. And so that class is really helping people see their own value and how to say no to people who don't see that value in them. And then I also teach content creation made easy-ish, because content creation is never easy, but it's also teaching the foundations of all the things that you could be doing in your business. There's no shoulds. It's just, these are the things, which things will apply to you and how can you make them happen. So those are the 3 core things that I think every business owner should know. Or at least have some knowledge, because even in content creation, you could farm it out to someplace like Rev Local, but if you don't understand the conversation they're having with you, how are you going to actually make a difference? Because they're just saying words that you can't understand them, then you don't even know what you're signing up for. And so I just feel like people need to have the basic knowledge to be as successful as they could be. They might feel they're successful at this point, and that's great. If they're happy there, then that's fine. But if they want to grow, they definitely need to expand their basic knowledge of all those things.
Sure. I'll open it up for questions. Does anyone have questions for
Molly.
Hi, Bill.
Glad you're here.
Thanks.
I'm very, very happy to see you. We've talked a couple of different times. My nephew, he's a borderline spectrum, I think is what the correct term is, and he wants to start a World War II blog.
Oh, cool.
And he's very factual in what he says. Like December 7th, 1941 is a fact. It's a date that lives in history. But he has the fear of if somebody comes in and starts to argue and blog about, did it actually happen?
Right.
Did we actually land on the moon? So those are the type of things that he's concerned about, and it's a preemptive of something that hasn't happened yet. Is that something that you help them people get past, or would you suggest that he sets it up in a different way to where the feedback isn't as critical?
So there's a couple of things there, like that, especially when I'm talking with some, I'm going to use this as the example because you've started it. So in this case, I would look at the person and be like, okay, great, we think something maybe spectrum-ish, especially you're telling me World War II, knows a lot of facts, is very specific, wants to start a blog, this is a passion, probably their special interest. They probably know obscure things that nobody knows, like manufacturing dates of random things. Maybe not that specific thing, but pretty close to.
You're 100% on it.
I would then say, what else? What else is affecting how they think? Now you're telling me that they're already worried that somebody is going to criticize what they're doing. So the first thing that I think of is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Okay, so that means, for those who have never heard of this before, it's not in the DSM, so nobody can diagnose you with it, but if you've been on TikTok, Neurospicy World, this is a term that we use all the time. And it means that everybody experiences rejection. No matter who you are, your neurotype, it doesn't matter. We all experience it. But a lot of us can go, that really made me sad today, or maybe the week, but I'll get over it. Somebody who has rejection sensitivity dysphoria cannot let go. They're like, oh, that person side-eyed me. Are they upset with me? Are they mad? What is gonna happen? And then they just spiral to this place that they can't get out of. And so what I'm hearing there is a beginning of that. Something hasn't even happened. You haven't taken any of the actions to do it, but you're already feeling rejected by imaginary people that you created. This is rumination. This is definitely anxiety. These are all those things. So what I would talk to in this case is we cannot control what people feel or think about what you do. You can have a blog and you do not have to have comments turned on. If the blog is purely for your passion and not business related, then just post what you want and F the rest of the people. I edited it, that was good. It doesn't matter. And so that's the thing that I would speak to first. And I would also explain that the expectation isn't for you to be the History Channel. Like, nobody expects you to go out and build this blog and immediately have millions of followers or millions of viewers on your site, or visitors, every day. It's for yourself and you enjoy it. And if people read it, great. And just set that expectation of it doesn't have to be super fancy. As time goes by, if people reach out and they're like, hey, you're really knowledgeable about this, you should come give a talk, or you should come do those things, that's when it starts becoming into a business territory, because you should be compensated for your time. But at this point, it's just a hobby. And I would just remind him that what other people say doesn't matter. Yeah. You had a question.
I relate to much of what you're saying, and on multiple levels, so personally and through connections. And I know it's not easy to talk about, so thank you.
You're welcome.
For your vulnerability. When you're talking about branding and social media, what particular platforms do you recommend or use, or is that based on the individual?
It's really based on the individual and the business and their ideal client. Back to that ideal client. So one of the things that I tell people when they're talking about their ideal client, people like to be like, it's just shallow. Like they're, 30 to 45 and they live in Lincoln, and like they kind of keep it at this shallow piece of information. But when you truly are successful with an ideal client, you understand how they think and act in certain situations. They're a real person to you. So in the case of social media, well, are they neurospicy? Are they neurotypical? Do they like short form content? Do they watch videos? Do they read blogs? How do they take in information? And then what kind of people do they like to group themselves with? Like, Instagram is great for people who are mostly millennials who like image content mostly. TikTok is great for a lot of neurospicy folks who do not have an attention span and just need to flip through and watch really short content with really short snippets of information. Facebook, that is multi-generational, but that is very local based, and I've noticed this is very dependent on where you live. Lincoln, Facebook is a huge thing here in Lincoln. Now, when I lived in DC or New York, it wasn't that. It was Instagram. So like it depends on your locale as much. And then X, I don't encourage anybody to be on X because this is drama and it's just paid to play kind of stuff that I don't encourage. But what I do encourage is breaking down content, so having some type of long form content, video, blog, something, breaking that down for your social media to make life easier. Did that help? Okay.
Say break it down. So like have like a YouTube video, just a YouTube video, and then the shorts.
Well, without disclosing my entire class content, no, it's fine. I mean, you can attend the content creation made easy-ish. Essentially, I encourage people, like, so if it's a YouTube, literally getting a transcription, AI does this for you, you don't have to do it. And taking snippets out of that and creating more content from that, either directly using those snippets as quotations or captions, or just getting new ideas and digging in deeper to those things. Does that help? Okay.
But that's what you do. You don't expect your clients to do.
Oh, I expect my clients to do that. I don't do that for them anymore. No, I teach them how, though, and I teach them how to ask for help for those things. I used to do all of these things for my clients, but I'm at a point in my life where I don't have the time to dedicate that time to getting that done, and that was a hard pill to swallow because I enjoyed doing it. But yeah, so for now, I teach companies how to do that. Mm-hmm.
So, can I ask another question?
Yes.
When did you actually start? And the name of your company escapes me.
It's just my name. It's Molly Hicks.
Molly.
Yeah.
When did you start this business?
Technically 2018. And then the stationery business was in 2014. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So with you talk a lot about different like platforms to advertise companies and things.
Yep.
And you recognize a lot of the demographic of who's on those places. How much of an impact does it make on someone's life in each of those areas? Because there are a lot of different generations of people going to different types of social media. Since you've really witnessed a lot of this, how much of an impact does it say to people who are like growing and developing, being so engrossed in some sort of media format like that, which is kind of like a cell phone oftentimes, people go on like computers to laptops, but how much of a detriment or a benefit does that, what do you say, is given to those people that are in like the younger generations, I guess, more specifically?
Can you rephrase the question?
So like, so is there more of a negative impact of people being on media platforms?
Oh, okay.
And being a benefit to try to connect via internet, or like how's that looked from like the neurodivergent?
Right. I can speak from a neurodivergent standpoint. For the first time ever, neurodivergent voices are being heard and being connected. We're seeing people who are on the spectrum who are nonverbal finally being able to say, this is how my life is. And so from that viewpoint, I can only see it as a positive because we're actually being able to see people's experiences, hear their experiences in their own words without it being filtered by 300 different people. Now, that being said, I saw an example this morning of AI being AI, where they're taking videos, they're using AI to change the words, make it sound like the actual user to prove that their product works or what have you. So are there people taking all of this technology and manipulating it to be just mean people? Yes, but I think that the connection and the vast amounts of information that we now have available to us through social media, Google, blogs, all of those things is important. Because, I mean, do you remember when we had to fact check something that somebody told us? Card catalog, please. You know, like, we don't have to do that anymore. It's like, okay, these are reputable sources. We know that. Let's go there. Let's fact check things. We don't have to rely on social platforms to tell us if it's fact checked or not. We can do that ourselves. So, yeah.
Is everyone sitting in this room neurodivergent in some way?
I'd have to talk to you for at least 5 minutes, but
Okay.
I don't want to call people out. That's mean. I mean, I would say if something I've said today resonates with you and you're like, Molly really said stuff that I've experienced in my life, or I feel that to my core, then the odds are you are neurodivergent. There's such a giant umbrella of people that fall into that. So.
Well, and part of the reason I asked that, though, is honestly, I mean, I'm still trying to understand exactly what that means.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I joined on Zoom, because I didn't want to miss anything.
Yeah.
And now that I'm here in person, I mean, I just want to understand more about what is meant by neurodivergent and what the expectations are, and if I'm interacting with someone who's neurodivergent, what should I be aware of?
That's a great question.
That's why I asked that question.
Yeah, these are the questions I love answering because I feel like it brings us all together regardless of our neurotype. So neurodivergent, everything has a bell curve, right? There's a bell curve in everything regardless of what we want to say or not. And so brains fall in a bell curve, you know, just like everything else. And so everything that's in that normal category of that bell curve is a neurotypical person. The outliers, yes? Oh, okay. The outliers are the neurodivergent folks. Most people think of autism, ADHD, but what they don't think about is migraines, epilepsy, Tourette's, which I haven't squeaked today, that's pretty good. There's all of these other things that if your brain does not fall into this normal piece, and I use normal with air quotes, please, then you fall into this neurodivergent category. There are a lot of things that neurodivergent folks experience that overlap. And sometimes it's really hard to know where people fit into what label. And the biggest thing that is important is just making sure you find people that understand you. A lot of folks, I would say, anybody born before 2000, if they are on the spectrum or have ADHD, they probably weren't diagnosed correctly, or at all, or acknowledged in any way. Person who would fall in that category would have felt like an outcast their entire life in school. Their parents would have constantly told them to be quiet or sit down, sit still, don't do that. And we think that that's normal in every family, but come to find out it's not. And so those are things that kids would experience. Feeling like they're alone, feeling depression really hard. Those are things that across the board for neurodivergent folks that they would experience. And as far as communicating, You've obviously experienced talking with a neurodivergent person, so I'm here. But in life, we see people all the time. They're not, in the grand scheme of things, it's a small percentage of the population of the planet. But at the same time, they hoard together. We all hoard together because like-minded people come together. And people who want to feel accepted are going to find other people that make them feel accepted. So if you find one and you are hanging out with one, newsflash, you might be one. And so there's a lot of interaction that does happen unknowingly. Biggest thing is, If you are able to see social cues, because not everyone is, I usually notice how if people are shifting a lot, if they're moving their hands a lot, I can tell that they're dysregulated. And I will say, hey, do you want to like walk around? Yes. Okay, so so your nervous system, when you're calm, cool, collected, you are regulated. All of your nervous system is fine. When you're dysregulated, somebody's gonna have to fact check this, but I think it's your fight or flight activates. And so you start unknowingly a lot of times trying to re-regulate your body because your nervous system becomes mush. Yeah.
So, not to point myself out here, but if you feel like you're in a constant state of fight or flight,
That's anxiety.
well, what should you do?
Okay, I just need to make the caveat that I am not a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm just a person with a lot of lived experience. I do not want anybody to be like, Molly diagnosed me. I just need to make that very clear. I don't need anybody coming after me. If you're in a constant state of fight or flight, I would go to a psychologist. Psychologist is the person you talk to figure out all your things. Psychiatrist is the person you go to for medicine. Just making that distinction. Psychologists are the most equipped people to help figure out why you are in fight or flight all the time. Do you have some type of trauma that you experience that is stuck and you're holding in your body? Were you just born with anxiousness inside of you? Like, there's a whole slew of different reasons why your fight or flight would be constantly activated. But if you're kind of like fidgeting all the time and doing things to try and regulate yourself, you also could just have ADHD, and you might also have anxiety as part of that.
I'm trying really hard to sit still.
You do not have to sit still. Like, literally when I teach my classes, I'm like, bring your fidgets, walk around, bring snacks. I don't care if it's crunchy. Like, knowing that people need these things when they're learning or existing. And I think that's one of the things in workplaces that is super important, is building places where everyone can succeed. Like, there is no reason that you have to sit at your desk for 8 hours a day. If you are more creative or more productive standing or walking around and talking into a device that is transcribing for you versus trying to type it all out because you can't type. Like, there's so many different ways that we can build neurodiverse, friendly spaces. And as business owners, it's important to help our team members feel safe and feel like they can be the most productive selves without requiring them to pretend to be something they're not. So you do not have to sit still. That's called masking, and you don't have to do that. Yes, deep breaths help. Yeah, go ahead.
2 questions.
Okay.
How does all of this tie back into your being a brand specialist?
Okay. So a lot of people see branding as colors and fonts and a logo. And your brand is so much more than that. I compare your brand to a croissant. So yes, we're going to get into it. So for those of you who did not know how to make a croissant, my non-bakery self is going to tell you. So you take dough, you roll it out, you put butter on it, you flip it over, you roll it out, you put butter on it. You keep doing this, and you do it for like hundreds of layers, like it's ridiculous. And then when you roll it up, it becomes this wonderful, flaky, puffy masterpiece, but it took tons and tons of layers to do this, right? Now, you could have not laminated the whole thing, but then you would have just had a Danish, and it's not the same thing. So if you were expecting a croissant and you got a Danish, you'd be disappointed. And so as you're a business, you need all of these flaky, good layers to have a super duper successful company. Now, sometimes you're a Pillsbury croissant. It does not have as many layers as if you were to go to like a French patisserie, but it still has layers, and every croissant is accepted. So if you're just starting out and you have 2 layers of your business, great. if you have 10 layers of your business, great. So my job as a brand strategist is to help build those layers, to build the client experience and help business owners make sure that they're incorporating every piece that they could include to make it the best they could. Yes.
Question 2.
Okay.
What's your ideal client?
So my ideal client.
I took a note about you suggesting.
Yeah. So my ideal client is a burnt out neurodivergent business owner that feels unaccepted. They probably cry shopping in the grocery store. There's no age specific to them. I mean, adults would be great. But they probably look alternative to other people. They probably really like gory or dark things because they feel like that's where they live in their life. They probably like really loud punk rock music or like some type of like heavy metal or something because it regulates them. That noise regulates them. It's not necessarily anything. They probably have a special interest that is so insane. Like I have one client who's a doctor, like Dr. House level doctor without the drugs, and loves Rush so much, knows every fact that you can imagine. Like those are the people that I can help the most because I understand why they're doing those things because I do those things. And then they probably have trauma. Almost all of my clients have trauma, either something that was done to them or something they experienced or watched. Sometimes it's financial trauma or any of those things. And a lot of times they are queer because that actually is a common thing for neurodivergent folks because we don't see things black and white. There's a lot of gray area in between that other people don't see. And so that's kind of all those things. I could probably go on for a lot longer, but
How do you find your clients, or how do they find you?
So as part of that branding, I have things that I talk about that aren't always business related. So I talk a lot about my family and parenting my neurodivergent kiddo, because then I find parents who are also parenting neurodivergent kiddos who happen, surprise, to be neurodivergent themselves, who are in the same boat trying to build businesses. I've joined ERN, I've joined the Community, which is a women focused business group. I'm the president of WSBI, the Women in Sales and Business. So like I definitely go out here because networking is such a huge piece of that in Lincoln. And I have conversations like this where people go, what the heck are you talking about? And I'm vulnerable all the time. I talk about my successes and my failures all the time. I'm not afraid to cry on a podcast. I do podcasting, so I have a podcast, and I also do guest interviews on podcasts. And then my website talks very specifically to my people. I give examples, like I talk about being 8 and building access databases because I thought computers and networks and all of those things Excel was cool. Like I talk about I cuss all the time, which also makes people feel very comfortable as a neurospicy individual. And it's right there on my homepage. Like I don't want to hide anything. I'm just right out there. And so all of those things kind of contribute to my people finding me. Because when they do find me, they go, oh my God, I read your website and I cried because it was the first time a person who was in business understood what I was feeling. And so that's when I knew my branding was on point, is when, because I mean, it's a process. You don't figure it out overnight. And so when I started getting a lot of people saying that, I was like, oh, we found it.
You are your content.
I am, yes. I'm a personal brand, for sure. Yeah.
I missed the definition of neurospicy.
Neurodivergent. We just used to say, a lot of us call it neurospicy. I like food analogies, evidently. So I think of it as ramen noodle flavor packets. Like, a lot of us have multiple neurospicy flavors, so we have multiple flavor packets. And some days we would really like our chicken flavor packet, ADHD, to work. But sometimes you open the chicken flavor packet and it's spicy shrimp. And I don't know if you've ever tried to eat chicken and it tastes like shrimp, but it does not work well. And it might be your anxiety has overtaken you, or your autistic traits have taken over when you really just wanted to hyper focus on something and you couldn't, or all of those things. So neurospicy is just a way to say, in a less intimidating to many way, neurodivergent.
Okay.
I did not coin that phrase. That is a phrase from someone else, though. I'm not going to claim that one.
So if I use the word neurospicy on a blog or something, other people are going to understand what I'm saying.
Yes, for the most part, yeah. I mean,
No,
people,
I understand.
right, yes. But for the most part, yes. Mhm. Anybody else?
I can ask questions for the rest of the afternoon.
Yeah, thumbs up for that.
Okay, I'm gonna pick on a 9-year-old. I have my son's baseball team.
Okay.
I'm coach my son's baseball team, and there's a young man on the team, and he is. Did everybody have a good time? Everybody else, yeah. No. He's very. He definitely has ADHD.
Okay.
I don't think that one is diagnosed. Two, I don't think they work with him. My son in particular, a lot of people thought he had ADHD. He just turned out he was just really freaking bored.
Those two are not,
They're not. Yeah, they're not. Yeah, they're kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
And trying to take 12 or 13, 9-year-old boys and keep them focused on activities hard enough. But when you have, there's a couple of boys in there that are like, they're not trying to take the group and move the group, but they're taking the group and moving the group. How do you approach that?
this is a
Besides-
parenting question. No, it's fine. I will answer.
Remember, she doesn't like
It's not.
No, I know. No, it's fine. It's fine.
The problem is it's not my child.
Right. So, reading between the lines, that child does not want to be there. That parent is forcing them to be there. They're never going to be happy because they probably don't even like sports, but we're in Nebraska. So, and if that kid is neurospicy in any way, you will never get them to like any moment of a forced activity. That's not going to happen. So I would change your expectations of the child.
Okay. That was kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah. That came out harsh. I didn't mean to be mean, but.
Well, no, it's, I've always kind of been like, hey, okay, I don't think this particular child wants to be here.
Yeah.
But, and it's their parents like pull up, like screech the tires, the kid jumps out, and they're like, vroom, gone. And they're always the last ones there to pick the kid up. So I think it's more of a break for them.
That also is a key of neurospicy child situation, but yeah. There's a lot going on there. Yeah, I mean.
I just don't want to, I don't want to ruin, it's not my child to ruin.
Yes. Well, yeah. No, I mean.
And Molly,
Yeah.
just with that specific situation, I feel like that can apply so much to the workplace, the team
Oh,
that
yes.
you're on.
Yeah.
And you talked about having a safe place
Mhm.
for people to be. I feel like we're hopefully becoming more knowledgeable
Mhm.
in that, and realizing that not everybody fits into the square.
Yes.
Right?
Mhm.
And knowing that there are different ways that people work, and that's okay, and how can you accommodate them? I still think there's pushback for that, right? Because we still have the traditional stereotypical businesses that you come to work every day,
Yeah.
8 to 5, sit at your desk. But I'm hoping that through people like yourself, that we can be more educated and as a whole and share that information. Does that sound on point?
Yes. I mean, I feel like a lot of the lower level employees, maybe even middle management, are like, oh, we need to adapt to the people and the environment. Everything's going great. And I'm not going to quote actual numbers because I don't really remember them, but I know there was a survey done a while back that said that people are most productive when working from home or in their preferred environment. but that upper management doesn't know how to lead, and so they're requiring them to come back in the office because it's the only way they know that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're not accepting that this is the way forward. And I think it is having more conversations, helping people see their own like struggles, like, why are you having so much struggle in the workplace? Oh, you've been dysregulated this whole time over, this kind of lighting messes with your ability to sit there or do your work. I think that as we learn more of things about that, it will improve the workplace. I think productivity will improve, and I feel like the work day won't be as long, the work week won't be as long, because people will be doing more in less time. And I feel like it's important for here locally for a lot of the businesses to think about how this applies to them, because like we think of larger companies like Google or even Meta, all of them, they have a little bit more loosey-goosey environment in their workplace. And we think, oh, that's just a big business. That's not my little small brick and mortar here in town. But the reality is it is. You have people coming in, your customers are coming in, and they're going to be neurodivergent as well. Maybe not all of them, but still some of them. They have to shop. And maybe your employees would be more successful with something a little different. Like we talked about the rejection sensitivity dysphoria earlier, and that's a huge one. Like when I had an assistant, I knew that they had RSD, and so if I had to provide constructive criticism, I would say, hey, I need to provide some constructive criticism. Is this a moment where you can take that, or do we need to talk about it at a later date? Because if she was in the mindset of, if I get one more thing, I'm gonna lose it, that wouldn't have been a moment that I could have a teachable, constructive moment with her. And so she was like, yeah, just tell me, I just need you to tell me. And I did, and she was like, oh, that wasn't as bad as what I thought it was. But if I hadn't have had that dialogue to allow her to give me permission to tell her, it could have gone completely different, where she would have spiraled, because I would have been like, hey, fix this. And she would have thought, oh my God, I am the worst person ever. I can't do anything, blah, blah, blah. And people think I'm exaggerating when I say like that's how that spirals, but literally that's what she told me that felt like, And so I feel like, even at your local food place or whatever, how you speak to all the different employees or even your customers is important.
Any other questions? So I have to say, Molly, I learned a lot today.
Hey, good.
So I appreciate it, and we can show our appreciation.
Thank you.